first time advancing
Oh, hey,
or
what's up,
changing
Internet?
careers, NSU has an
Monday,
undergraduate,
Tuesday.
master's, professional, or doctoral program designed for you. Flexible class schedules online or on
There's something
campus, and
wrong.
Fort Lauderdale or Miami will help you
What's wrong
realize your
here?
potential. An
Let's
NSU
see.
degree is closer than you think. Information at nova.edu.
Time now to check in with Christine Ewington.
Oof.
Thanks so much, Andy. Earlier this
Snap.
year, Miami-Dade County Mayor Carlos
snap.
Jimenez made the politically unpopular decision to play
There we go.
immigration ball with President Trump. So as WLRN's Tim Paget reports, you'd think the Trump administration would spell the mayor's name right.
President Trump threatened to cut federal funds for so-called sanctuary cities that don't help federal agents detain undocumented immigrants. To avoid losing $300 million for Miami-Dade County, Mayor Carlos Jimenez decided to comply with Trump's order. That sparked large and angry public protests here. Now, after Jimenez stuck his political neck out for the Trump administration, it has said thank you by misspelling the mayor's name. Today, the Justice Department sent Jimenez a letter directing him to file documents confirming Miami-Dade's compliance with the detainer requests. Except instead of addressing him as Jimenez, G-I-M-E-N-E-Z, Justice called him Jimenez, G-I-M-I-N-E-Z. Jimenez, spelled Jimenez, spokesman Michael Hernandez confirms that Jimenez, repeat Jimenez, will file the compliance papers. And he added, when we do, we will also spell the mayor's name correctly. The same Justice Department letter went out to leaders in 8 other local governments. WLRN has confirmed their names were spelled correctly. I'm Tim Paget in Miami.
And this is WLRN News. I'm Christine DiMattei. Here's Andy.
Thank you, Christine. Have a very good evening. And a good evening to all our listeners tuning in to All Things Considered, which continues in just a moment. The time is 10 to 7.
From NPR News, this is All Things Considered. I'm Kelly McEvers.
And I'm Robert Siegel. After weeks of negotiating with Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, the White House secured the release of an American charity worker after she was jailed for 3 years by the Egyptian government. In 2014, Aya Hijazi was running a charity to aid street children when she was charged with child abuse and trafficking. That charge was widely dismissed as false by U.S. officials and by human rights groups. Her return home to Falls Church, Virginia, where she grew up, is being celebrated at the White House. But there are other Americans currently detained by the Egyptian government. NPR has been told there are close to 20. And joining us now is one American who was detained in Egypt and released in 2015, Mohammed Sultan. He's now an advocate working to release other political prisoners in Egypt. Welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
You helped with the most recent release of Aya Hijazi. What did that take?
This has been an extraordinary effort, and there had been many efforts on the Hill, starting by her Congressman Don Beyer, who went out on a limb for her from the get-go, Congressman Conley, Senator McCain, Senator Kaine, Senator Warner, Senator Rubio. There had been an extraordinary effort before that on the NGO space with RFK Human Rights and other NGOs, also by the Obama administration, who from day one had pushed for her release and mine on extremely high senior levels.
But what finally led the Egyptians to release her?
I don't know what exactly that is. I would assume that this was kind of a goodwill gesture from Sisi after he came and got a very warm welcome and embrace by Trump.
You were jailed by the Egyptian government for nearly 2 years. What happened, and what did they charge you with?
I was in there for about 22 months. I had to undergo a 16 months wet hunger strike, nearly dying 10 times. It took an extraordinary effort, again, a worldwide campaign that then pressured the U.S. government to intervene on my behalf until I was released in mid-2015.
You had been protesting, taking part in a demonstration?
I was actually picked up from my home, but I was shot right before that for live tweeting protests and dispersals. I was shot in the arm. Yes, after a bullet missed my head, the second one struck my arm. I was targeted because I was live tweeting. And when you think about the Egyptian prisons, again, there's about 60,000 political prisoners, and as you mentioned, about 19 Americans that are there now.
President Trump has praised President al-Sisi's leadership as fantastic. He's restored U.S. military aid that President Obama had frozen. Do you think that President Trump possesses the leverage to at least get the other Americans released, or would it be, one goodwill gesture a year for as long as President Trump and President al-Sisi are both in power?
I mean, I'm hesitant to chalk this up to President Trump's personal diplomacy. There has been consistent high-level pressure on Sisi to release Aya and the other political prisoners. So although he would like to claim this victory, I would use this as a good win. I think we can use this as a good momentum to work off of, to get other Americans and get other political prisoners out. But if you were to ask me, is embracing a brutal dictator to get results or begets results, I would say no every day of the week.
Mohammed Sultan, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Mohammed Sultan is an advocate working to release political prisoners in Egypt. He himself was held in an Egyptian prison for 2 years.
Members of Congress return to Washington next week, and that means we can expect to hear again soon about what's known as unmasking. Republicans on the committees investigating Russia's role in the U.S. presidential election have made unmasking a central theme of their inquiries. NPR's David Welna has more.
There's one rule all U.S. intelligence agencies have to follow. If they spy on Americans, they have to get a warrant to do so. But what happens if they're spying on a foreigner who just happens to talk with or mention an American? National Security Agency Director Mike Rogers was asked about that last month at the House Intelligence Committee's only public hearing on Russian meddling. Rogers told the panel that when an American's name pops up in so-called incidental collection, the data is often discarded. But there are times, he added, when such names do have intelligence value.
In our reporting, then, we will mask the identity of the individual. We'll use a phrase like U.S. Person 1 or U.S. Person 2.
And those redacted intercepts often get passed on to U.S. officials. Raj Day was general counsel at the NSA during the Obama administration. The Americans' names in those reports, he says, remain masked.
But it's not uncommon for an intelligence recipient in given circumstances to request for a name to be unredacted if it's necessary, one, to understand the intelligence is the standard, or two, if there's potential evidence of a crime.
Just how many Americans have had their identities unmasked is still not clear. Republicans suspect one who did, and who then lost his job, is Trump's first national security advisor, Michael Flynn. Just days before Trump took office, the Washington Post reported several phone calls made by Flynn to the Russian ambassador. The Post source was a senior government official. Republicans suspect was Flynn's predecessor, Susan Rice. At that same House hearing, South Carolina Republican Trey Gowdy pressed FBI Director James Comey about what Rice might have known.
Would National Security Advisor Susan Rice have access to an unmasked U.S. citizen's name?
I think in general, and any other national security advisor would, I think, as a matter of their ordinary course of their business.
A couple of weeks later, the New York Times' Glenn Thrush asked President Trump, who'd already tweeted that President Obama had had him wiretapped, about Rice's alleged actions.
Do you think she might have committed a crime? Do I think? Yeah. Yes, I think.
A day earlier, Rice had declared on MSNBC that there indeed were times when she needed the identities of Americans unmasked in order to understand intelligence reports.
What I would do, or what any official would do, is to ask their briefer whether the Intelligence Committee would go through its process, and there's a long-standing established process, to decide whether that information as to who the identity of the U.S. person was could be provided to me.
Rice, whom Republicans would like to haul before the House Intelligence Panel, denies having leaked any classified information. Still, Elizabeth Goitein, a privacy advocate at the Brennan Center for Justice, says it's worrisome that the standard for unmasking Americans' identities is understanding the importance of foreign intelligence.
That may not sound like a major loophole, but the definition of foreign intelligence information in the statute is so broad, it would encompass casual conversations about current events. So it's actually quite a significant loophole.
Ironically, the only official who's in trouble over unmasking is the House Intelligence Panel's Republican chairman, Devin Nunes. stepped aside from leading its Russia probe. Nunes is now facing an ethics inquiry after citing classified intelligence intercepts to suggest the identities of Trump and some of his associates may have been unmasked during the post-election transition. But the issue isn't being dropped. If and when another hearing is held, Republicans will likely be asking more questions about the unmasking of Americans by U.S. intelligence agencies than about alleged meddling in American elections by Russian agents. David Wetland, NPR News, Washington.
This is NPR News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR member stations. And from Inada, creators of the Japanese-made Dreamwave massage chair with shiatsu point detection and 16 programmed massages, including morning and nighttime sessions. Retail dealers nationwide. More at dreamwavechair.com. From Angie's List, for more than 20 years helping consumers select local service providers, dedicated to promoting fairness and transparency about local pricing and quality, at angieslist.com. Angie's List, home is where our heart is. And from Atlassian, maker of collaboration software Jira, Confluence, Bitbucket, and Trello, working to help teams across industries ascend to new heights to create what's next. Learn more at Atlassian.com. Atlassian, team up.
Good evening. You're listening to 91.3 WLRN. We're live and local with South Florida's only NPR news source. On Point is coming up next. Here on 91.3 WLRN, HD1 Miami Fort Lauderdale, 91.5 WKWM, HD1 Marathon Key West, 90.7 WFLV, HD2 West Palm Beach, and 101.9 NPR for the Palm Beaches. Also live online, web streaming worldwide at WLRN.org or via your favorite mobile app. It's now 7 o'clock.
Major funding for On Point is provided by GEICO, offering auto insurance coverage for cars, trucks, or SUVs, and providing 24/7 customer service. More information on auto insurance at geico.com or 1-800-947-AUTO.
From WBUR Boston and NPR, I'm Tom Ashbrook, and this is On Point. A Wrong Way Armada and Bill O'Reilly out at Fox News this week. Tough talk from Mike Pence on North Korea, but the Armada was headed the other way. In Paris, ISIS claims an attack on the Champs-Élysées. In Arkansas, an execution. In Georgia, a telling tight vote. Exxon wants sanctions dropped for a vast Russian oil deal. We've got turmoil in Venezuela. President Trump welcoming controversial new presidential powers in Turkey. Prince Harry's lament and a Facebook murder. Up next on Point, our weekly news roundtable goes behind the headlines. First, this news.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Jack Speer. President Trump says he is planning a big announcement about tax reform next week. NPR's Scott Horsley reports it's part of a flurry of activity as the president nears his 100th day in office.
In an interview with the Associated Press, Trump said he's preparing to unveil a massive tax cut proposal for both individuals and corporations, but he offered no details. The president has also said he wants to repeal the Affordable Care Act before taking on the tax code. There's been some talk of another push by the House to repeal Obamacare before Trump's 100th day in office. But the president told reporters he's not in any rush.
A lot of good things are happening. Thank you, folks.
You think you're going to get a health care vote next week?
100 days? No, doesn't matter if it's next week. Next week doesn't matter.
Trump's 100th day in office is a week from Saturday. Scott Horsley, NPR News, the White House.
President Trump was predicting today the recent attack in Paris that left a policeman dead and 2 others wounded will have, in his words, a big effect on voters in the upcoming presidential race there. Trump's statement via Twitter will French Prime Minister Bernard Cazeneuve, heard here through a BBC interpreter, is calling on the French people not to be bowed by terror.
Ladies and gentlemen, the government is fully mobilized that nothing will stop this fundamental democratic moment for our country from going ahead. On the eve of a major rendezvous, I call on everyone to show the spirit of responsibility and dignity. It is our duty to not give in to fear, intimidation, and manipulation.
Italy's premier also weighed in on the attack, saying he hopes it will not affect how voters cast their ballots Sunday in the first round of French elections. Sales of existing homes hit their highest level in more than a decade last month. The National Association of Realtors says demand is outstripping the supply of homes. NPR's Yuki Noguchi has more.
Sales of existing homes were up 5.9% in March, reaching the highest level since before the housing crisis in February of 2007. Lower unemployment and increases in wages is helping drive demand. Existing home sales increased 4.4% month over month in March to a seasonally adjusted rate of 5.71 million, a higher level than economists were expecting. The supply of homes is not increasing at the same level, forcing the median price of homes to increase at a faster rate than incomes. That median price is up 6.8% from a year ago. Yuki Noguchi, NPR News, Washington.
The number 2 official at the Federal Reserve says he agrees with the assessment by the International Monetary Fund that prospects for the global economy are looking up. Fed Vice Chair Stanley Fischer, in an interview with business news channel CNBC today, said optimism in part stems from China's economy picking up. In fact, Europe continues to hold up despite Britain's Brexit vote is also helping to buoy global markets. Stocks lost ground at week's end. The Dow down 30 points. The Nasdaq fell 6 points today. You're listening to NPR. The suspect in a string of racially motivated shootings last week in Fresno was in court today. Corey Ali Muhammad, the man who allegedly opened fire killing 3 people on the street there, shouted out during his appearance that natural disasters striking the U.S. will increase. Muhammad, in addition to facing charges in those killings, was charged today with killing an unarmed security guard at a motel a week earlier. Bail for Muhammad was set at $2.6 million. He's due back in court next month. Soul singer Cuba Gooding Sr. has died in Los Angeles. He was 72. NPR's Rose Friedman reports the cause of death has not been determined.
Cuba Gooding Sr.'s band, The Main Ingredient, hit it big in 1972 with this song. Everybody plays the fool sometime. But Gooding had seemed destined to play music since long before that. His parents had encouraged him. And, as he told member station WMFE in 2014, he had grown up in Harlem, surrounded by performance.
When I saw Frank Sinatra, I'm saying to myself, God, I'm in Harlem, I'm right next to these stars, Ella Fitzgerald, and I said, this is really what I want to do.
Cuba Gooding Sr. was also known as the father of Oscar-winning actor Cuba Gooding Jr. Rose Friedman, NPR News.
NASA's Cassini spacecraft is beginning its final adventure around Saturn. Early Saturday, officials say Cassini will wing past Saturn's moon Titan. Then Cassini will be placed on a path no spacecraft has gone before, the gap between Saturn and its rings. After that, a number of transits are planned before Cassini vaporizes in Saturn's atmosphere. It was launched in 1997. This is NPR.
Support for NPR comes from the financial services firm of Raymond James, offering personalized wealth management advice and banking and capital markets expertise, along with a legacy of putting clients' financial well-being first. Learn more at raymondjames.com.
Monday's Topical Currents looks at the Key Clubhouse of South Florida, which helps those with mental illness disorders reintegrate into the workplace and community. Hello, Bonnie Berman here. Key Clubhouse is a close-knit membership group of adults living with mental illness. Some 42% are employed and have greatly improved physical and mental health, plus reduced occurrences of psychiatric hospital stays. Learn more about the Key Clubhouse on Topical Currents. That's Monday at 1.
From WBUR Boston and NPR, I'm Tom Ashbrook, and this is On Point. This week, an attack in Paris, a warning to North Korea, Bill O'Reilly out, Arkansas execution, Georgia politics. High-profile terror in Paris yesterday. ISIS claimed responsibility for a shooting attack on the Champs-Élysées that left a police officer dead and 2 wounded.
You have to stay back, please! Terror in the heart of Paris tonight, on the world-famous Champs-Élysées. Packed with tourists, a gunman opened fire on 2 policemen.
Vice President Mike Pence with a warning to North Korea from the demilitarized zone on Monday.
North Korea would do well not to test his resolve or the strength of the armed forces of the United States in this region.
And political tea leaves as Georgia Democrat Jon Ossoff fell just short of capturing a long conservative-held House seat in preliminary voting Tuesday. He vowed to fight on.
We are courageous. We are humble. And we know how to fight.
This hour on Point, our weekly news roundtable with Margaret Brennan of CBS News, David Haynes of the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel, and On Point news analyst Jack Beatty. We are broadcasting today from the studios of Wisconsin Public Radio in Milwaukee, where we've landed this week on our On Point national listening tour. You can join us on air or online, where this conversation is always on. What do you see in Paris, in Arkansas, North Korea, Russia this week, Turkey, Georgia, Facebook? We're at 1-800-423-8255. That's 800-423-TALK, or join us anytime at onpointradio.org or on Facebook or Twitter at onpointradio. Joining me now from Washington is Margaret Brennan, White House and Senior Foreign Affairs Correspondent for CBS News. Margaret, welcome back to On Point.
Hi, Tom.
Great to have you with us. With me here in Milwaukee is David Haynes, editorial page editor for the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel. David, it's great to be in Milwaukee. Great to have you with us here.
Welcome to Milwaukee, Tom.
Thank you. And from Boston, Jack Beatty joins us. Hello, Jack.
Hello, Tom, Margaret, and David.
Margaret, take us right away, if you would, to the shooting, the killing in Paris, and its significance for the election coming up this weekend on Sunday in France.
Well, this shooting, as you said, on the streets of Paris comes at a really sensitive time. Right away, you heard President Trump say from the White House that this appeared to be a terrorist attack, and essentially said this is part of the new normal. Europe now really continuously being the target of these either one-off attacks, small scale, large scale, but really horrific taking of life. But it comes on the eve of what will be a very significant election for the presidency in France over the weekend. And you had President Trump tweeting today that that terror attack we just saw will likely influence the outcome of the election. It's an interesting comment by the President of the United States, because there had been all this conversation about whether someone who reflected some of the values that he's spoken about in terms of sort of nationalism, protectionalism, pushing back against integration, Marine Le Pen, that very controversial candidate, now being seen as perhaps politically benefiting by the fear that has been once again stoked in France by this fatal attack.
And the fate of Europe also in question here, if Marine Le Pen should go on not only in this first round, but ultimately to take the presidency.